This is a book of prayer poems. This is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda, a book of prayer poems. And this is, I want to pour the scent of gratefulness at thy feet. The doomsday clouds of inevitable tragic events thundered and poured down sheets of suffering on my life. My courage almost drowned in fear as a million difficulties rose up to destroy me. Only by clinging fast to thee did I survive. Now, when the cannons of uncertainty boom before me, and the shells of calumny, persecution, and fierce opposition fall, rain-like around me, I am ever protected in the impregnable fortress of thy love. I am so grateful to thee. When the light of good fortune dawns again, as it must always, following every hard night of struggles, it is easy to smile welcomingly at the pleasing sunrise of thy grace. During dark nights of misfortune, however, I find it even sweeter now to offer thee the flowers of my appreciation for being always there, protecting me. I offer all my gratitude at thy feet of deep inner communion. Receive me, my eternal beloved, in sacred silence. And this is from Rays of the One Light, which are parallel commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Each week we read from both scriptures as prescribed by Yoganandaji and by his guru Sri Yukteswarji, who was guided by Babaji to compare the two scriptures and to show the same underlying truths between them. This week's reading is entitled, Ego, Friend or Foe? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ begins his Beatitudes with the words, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. To be poor in spirit in such a way as to merit the kingdom of heaven doesn't mean to be poor-spirited. Rather, it means to see oneself as owning nothing, since all belongs to God. For all is a manifestation of His consciousness. St. John of the Cross wrote, If you would own everything, seek to own nothing. That which the ego relinquishes, offering it up to soul consciousness, is reclaimed forever in cosmic consciousness. Nothing is ever lost. Paramhansa Yogananda tells the story in Autobiography of a Yogi of the levitating saint, Bhaduri Mahashai. Master, said a disciple of this saint once ardently, you are wonderful. You have renounced riches and comforts to seek God and teach us wisdom. It was well known that Bhaduri Mahashai had forsaken great family wealth in his early childhood, when single-mindedly he entered the yogic path. You are reversing the case. The saint's face held mild rebuke. I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures, for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How, then, have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Is that a sacrifice? The short-sighted worldly folk are verily the real renunciates. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys. The Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter states, All things are everywhere by nature wrought, in interaction of the qualities. The fool, cheated by self, thinks, This I did, and that I wrought. But thou strong-armed prince, a better lessoned mind, knowing the play of visible things within the world of sense, and how the qualities must qualify, standeth aloof even from his acts. Thus through Holy Scripture God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. It's a very important topic this week, and I've noticed that I tend to say that every week, that it's a very important topic this week. Well, it is. In fact, in a certain way, you could say, other than God, which is the most important topic, this is after we decide that God is the most important topic, then we come to, okay, how do we get to Him? And in fact, it's even probably worth mentioning or discussing, what does it even mean to get to God? What does it mean, liberation, samadhi, to be free, jivan, to be a jivan mukta? What does it even mean? I mean, we can say, everyone says that's the best, and so I want the best, so I want that. But that's just abstract. Of course, on one level, our hearts can have that yearning for what? Peace. Just peace. There's been enough of the opposite. I just need peace. The first time we heard in India the phrase, "This is chewing my brains." Oh, we loved it. We'd never heard that phrase before. Or, "Stop chewing my brains." Wow. Fantastic. I don't think it was meant literally, but it's what happens. I mean, and if there's no one around to chew your brain, we chew our own brains. Just, we say, wringing our hands, worrying about something, about which we have no control over often. We do if we pray. We have an effort to, we can put out energy. We don't necessarily have control, but we can influence through prayer. But just worrying is unhelpful. And how do you know? Just try. You know, a friend of mine, she was worried about her children. Her children are grown up. They have children of their own. Everybody's perfectly fine, but she worried. And she worried so much that she couldn't sleep at night. And so she ended up getting very few hours of sleep each night. As a result, the BP went very high. And then her children worried about her. And she was a friend of mine, but she was not open to these things. And she said, I want to get off this BP medication. And I said, I have an idea. She said, don't say it. Okay. So anyway, I pray for her. But the thing is that peace, we find the most peace in God. We also crave joy. It's not enough to just have a life where everything goes fine and I follow the rules and I eat and I sleep. We want joy also. And you see that. You see even in animals how they play with each other. Why would they do it? Inefficient. But they know there's this instinct for enjoyment. The heart seeks that. It manifests on a lower level as pleasure, just physical pleasure, something pleasing to the senses, and then moves on to happiness, which you could say is more emotional and not connected necessarily to anything physical, and then beyond that to bliss. We crave love also. There's something very satisfying and fulfilling when we feel a connection in love. And wisdom too. We want to understand this life. As Master writes in Autobiography of a Yogi, that it is not enough for a person to have a roof over their heads and to have food and to be able to sleep and so on. Wisdom too is a native hunger. It's an inborn hunger. We seek to understand. There, you can train animals that if they do a certain thing, then they get a reward. It's fun for me. They have, now that YouTube has opened up the whole world of us to each other, there's this cute little video of a cat that's been trained that when it rings a bell, it gets a treat. Dogs, fine. Everyone's, yes, dogs are far superior. But cat owners know that they're not that much superior. I have to say, one of the hardest teachings for me to accept of masters is that the most evolved species of animals are dogs, horses, and whales. Dolphins. Those with the prefrontal, because they have this prefrontal lobe there. And I was saying, and cats. Also cats, the 4 most evolved. Anyway, so So you see these videos of the cat bing, 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 bing over and over again, puzzles that animals can solve to get the treat. It's fascinating. In fact, even zookeepers have found that animals do much better if they're given puzzles. They're given toys that they've never seen before, because when they live in the wild all the time, they're finding new things. We live in the wild, and don't we discover all the time different things? I never knew when the transformer exploded it could burn that color. Wow. We're always being exposed to new experiences. And so that same thing the animals need. So they call it enrichment. And so it's important even for us to have our own enrichment. I don't mean that you have to go into a cage and play with a toy or something while lying down, but that we do something new every day. Master said that. Do something new every day. And it's fun, because if something crazy happens, you can say, well, I did my homework. I did something new every day today. I've never done that before. Another thing, though, is if you have it, you might think of, can I read this book upside down? 82, that's the page number. And so just anything. I mean, it's silly, but anything, just to think of something you've never thought of before, because it disrupts our mental patterns from following the same grooves over and over again. As Master said, some people become such creatures of habit. They always do the same thing. And he said, you'll always hear them humming the same melody year in and year out. They become psychological antiques. And Swamiji said when they were with Master, he was constantly doing things to disrupt their mental patterns. He might say something that you couldn't quite follow, or he would change their schedules all around or something, but to keep them awake. Now, India has a way of keeping us on our toes that way, sort of automatically. Suddenly there is no current, or suddenly there is a big wedding next door, or suddenly, there's always different things coming that help to kind of wake us up out of just a low energy, peaceful existence. There's a great vibration of God here too that gives a deep, peaceful experience and vibration also. But you get some of that. I remember Dharmini and I were in Gurgaon in the early days of Ananda, India, and we were a part of a big crowd that was walking towards a mall, just because there were always big crowds. It wasn't a sale, it was just a normal day. But we were all walking towards this, and suddenly as we were walking towards this beautiful glass and steel structure and everything, we couldn't quite see, but all the heads started going like this and parting, and then coming back around. And we were sort of, what's happening? And right at the entrance to the mall, in front of the Haldirams or whatever, was a huge bull just sleeping. And there was no sign or everything, but everyone seemed to understand, do not disturb the bull. And I mean, I just love that. That was the only time that it ever happened to me in my life, but it made an impression. It was something was new for that day. Pass the bull on your way to the mall. And so it's very good to, again, keep ourselves awake in that way, and it keeps us from just thinking always the same thoughts. But that peace, that love, that joy, that wisdom that we seek, those are aspects of God. That is God. In other words, that feeling of home, that feeling of connectedness. Seeing Gayatri here, it reminds me of how she said, when I came to this path and I come to these teachings, everything for me feels in sync. And I loved that phrase because it's not one I'd heard before. And it's a perfect way to describe it. Again, feeling at home, feeling connected, feeling this is mine, this suits me, but also feeling in sync. What does it mean to be in synchronicity with something? It means your vibration matches that vibration. They move together. And so it's so nice when we feel that. And it's such a relief sometimes because we've often felt the opposite. We sort of walk around going, I seem to be vibrating off from everyone else. And I sometimes, it's funny because devotees are usually born devotees. Unfortunately, they don't get labeled by the doctor. This one's a devotee, so, seeking God. So you keep that in mind when you're raising her. Doesn't always work out. And first of all, another thing to remember is that everyone in the world is on the spiritual path. That's something Master said. When a disciple said to him, "Sir, will I ever leave the spiritual path?" And Master saw that he would, and in fact he did. But to encourage him, and also it's a truth, Master said everyone in the world is on the spiritual path. You could say, okay, that's fine. Could you tell that to my boss? Could you tell that to this one or that one? But the point is that we can agree that everybody is seeking some form of happiness and trying to avoid suffering. That is a universal. Again, in the beginning, I seek pleasure, I try to avoid pain. But you move beyond that because you realize some pain, physical pain, is unavoidable. But suppose you have to suffer something for a good cause. I had to do that in a trivial way the other day, and I thought this is for a good cause. And then the happiness is more than the pain. That's even, you could say, what sacrifice is. It's a sacrifice on one level, but for a greater happiness in some protection of others or in some principle being fulfilled or being closer to God. But even happiness is still emotional because it has its opposite. Not just sadness or despair anyway. There's a lot of opposites to that happiness. And so even then we find that happiness, good as it is still too much dependent on outer circumstances. Too much dependent on my desires. In fact, all of happiness comes from, Master said, that we are basically happy. But I should say unhappiness comes from. We are basically happy, and then we have a desire that is unfulfilled at the moment. Even something as simple as, now I'm hungry. And then he said, then suddenly our happiness goes away because we've put a condition on it. I can't be happy until roti. And then, suppose you're not in a cooking mood, and then so you figure, Swiggy will cook today. And so Swiggy is on its way in 4 minutes. 4 minutes, And then it stays 4 minutes. And we refresh the app, and it is still 4 minutes. And we call, Anna! And some traffic is there. But I have a roti emergency! And we're more and more upset. And then finally, when the roti comes, now I have to say I'm enjoying this vicariously through you all because I am allergic to roti. So I have to enjoy my rotis through many other bodies, although it makes me sick. Doesn't mean I don't like it. And so anyway, that condition gets fulfilled and then we are happy again. I mean, what if you're fasting, for example? Fasting is good for health. Master recommended it's good to fast once a week. And he pointed out that animals automatically, when they're sick, they will fast. It's not that they're saying, you made me sick and now I'm going on a hunger strike. It's that they know instinctively that just let the body heal itself and it can heal faster with fasting. So anyway, I'm not here to sell fasting. In fact, someone said that. It was a funny comment on some fasting thing. They said, here this person is selling fasting again. Oh, that's right. Fasting doesn't cost anything. And so it's kind of a fun thought. So anyway, this if you're fasting, you might have some discomfort, and then you find it goes away. Hunger goes away. It's strange. For me, I was shocked when I discovered that, because till then, I had never been hungry long enough to find out that it goes away. Because I was hungry. Now I'm not hungry. So, anyway, we find that this happiness, too, depends too much on outer conditions, and those are out of our control, and therefore our happiness is out of our control. This is what happened when Swamiji was asked by someone. She said, my husband pointed out to me the other day that here I do all these spiritual things and I do all this yoga and meditation, and yet I am always worried and unhappy. And he sits, watches on the couch, watches TV, drinks his beer, and he is happy. And she said, and Swamiji, it's true. That's the saddest part. And then Swamiji said, well, I can understand, but you see, give it time. Because the thing is, such happiness, such comfort never lasts. It's dependent. To be happy, I need the couch and the TV and the beer. And then what happens if one of those is removed? Or something else happens and all that. Suddenly I'm unhappy. He said, we are seeking a happiness that is not dependent on things outside of ourselves, on a certain person behaving a certain way, treating us a certain way. And when these things happen, it's important to be honest with how we feel. Just someone says, by the way, you're a fool and I'm taking your job. And you say, that's fine. My happiness is unconditioned by your behavior. We may have to say, ouch, maybe not to them, but to Master. To say, that hurts. We have to be able to be honest about our feelings, not to say, it hurts and this helped me plot my revenge. I was thinking rifle or, In other words, we don't want to say that I'm committed to feeling this way. I remember once I was so upset with someone for how they had spoken to me, and I talked to Haridas about it. And we were living in the same community, Dharmini and I, and Haridas and Romaji. And I was basically ready for war, and I had all the weapons and all the ammunition, and I just wanted his blessing to go forth. And instead, he first of all, he began by saying, I understand. And yes, that is difficult. And oof, I don't know why she said that. And it's important when someone comes to you upset to first acknowledge the feelings rather than going, all is Brahma. Why do you suffer? It means you must have ego. Guess what? Welcome to this planet. We all have ego until we get free. So better to first on a not on a human level, it's more than that, on a compassionate, on a level of empathy, on a level of kindness even. Often we get hurt because we have been unacknowledged, and so it's helpful if somebody does acknowledge, meaning if that's your role, somebody comes to you, it's fair, it's good to say that rather than jumping over it to the punchline. But then he came around to, but she has a very stressful job, and we have to all be thankful that she does that job, because then none of us have to do it. It's a lot of responsibility. And I found myself getting madder because he was talking me out of it. And he was right. That was what made just... It was right. It was true. And in fact, I wasn't really madder. I was happier, ultimately. But he talked me down. And so it's very important to first be open with how we feel, but then be ready to let it go. Because most of the time, whatever we say may not be helpful if the person is just allergic to listening. If they just can't hear, then don't bother. Pray for them. If it's a close relationship, a friendship, it is helpful to try to say something sometimes for the sake of the friendship. You can't just sit swallowing it or bottling it up the whole time. Then it's not even really a friendship. It's more servitude. I am here to please you at all times. But we just have to feel it out. Ultimately, it only matters if God is pleased. Not only because He's the closest, but also because you feel His pleasure, you feel His joy, and that comforts us. Swamiji was so in tune with Master, and he would very often, in different situations, say, I feel Master's smile in my heart. And so we heard that, and when I heard that, I wondered what that would feel like. Wow. And sometimes he would say, I've meditated on this, I don't have a clear answer. Sometimes he would say, I don't have a clear answer from Master yet, meaning he didn't feel the smile in his heart, perhaps yet. And so he would wait, therefore, even on a project. Let's see. Or he might say, let's try it, but with caution. Just sort of, not even caution, but consideration. Let's be careful. Let's be tentative before fully committing in this direction until I feel that. And he wouldn't say that, don't do this unless I feel it. He didn't mean that. It's if someone asked him and it was relevant to that. Otherwise, he encouraged people to consult their own intuition. But again, ask intuition. Ask for your intuition. Ask for God to help you. And say, guide me in this. So when it comes down then to what keeps us from God? As I said, the most important topic is God. So then secondarily, the topic becomes, okay, what keeps us from that bliss? What keeps us from that joy? What keeps us from fully being ourselves, who I really am? Remember, you don't really grow on the spiritual path into another person. You don't come to learn, you really come to unlearn. You come to let go of so many of these things. And so, as I said, we often come in with that. In fact, Krishna says in the Gita, in response to Arjuna's very relatable question, after Krishna talks about all the great things of yoga and how you can help yourself and you can merge in God and become Jivan Mukta, and Arjuna says, yes, and what about happens to those people who don't make it? If you don't get there in this lifetime, then what? And Krishna says, you are born into a situation that allows you to easily and quickly get back on the spiritual path, resume your spiritual practices, sometimes even born into a wealthy home. And you sort of wonder about that, like, well, a wealthy home? Like, did somebody make a mistake? Because I wasn't born in a wealthy home. And, can I appeal this or something? And it's the point is that even Swamiji said in all the ashrams in India, you often see that they're filled with people from well-to-do middle-class backgrounds. It's because they've had their desires fulfilled on some basic level and said it's not enough. I mean, if you're hungry every day, not by choice, there's something very clear in front of you to work on, and so on. But when you say, yeah, a friend of mine had a perfect house, perfect marriage, perfect everything, and he had the perfect job, and she had a perfect job too, and then she just sat down in the middle of her kitchen and cried. She said, is this it? Because everything she had thought would bring happiness did not bring it. And she found herself agitated. Anyway, she learned Hong Sa right after that, joined Ananda, Kriya, everything, and that was it for her. That's how we can feel when we say, this is still not filling that emptiness in my heart, not satisfying that hunger. That's what makes you a devotee. Having that hunger, having that desire for truth, that desire for God, that has to be there, especially for truth. It doesn't even have to be for God necessarily. It will lead you to God. I myself, when I was growing up, was only interested in truth. I didn't really know if God even existed, but I wanted to know the truth. And if someone would even say, why do you want to know the truth? I couldn't answer. I couldn't explain. I wanted to say, and why don't you want to know the truth? But the thing is, he did want to know the truth. He just wanted it to be his truth. And he wanted me to know his truth, which was to say, obey his orders. And so this sense of hunger for the truth is what makes you a devotee, but you may not find yourself surrounded by devotees. Sometimes you find that husbands and wives, especially in India, there's more of that family members start to come to the spiritual path either together or as a result of their one of them coming to the path. It's beautiful. And Swamiji said, and we all look upon such families with envy. Because we would have all loved to have brought our families, of course, with us. Not because then we could all be in the same spiritual path, but because they could be happier. Just in the way that it has made us happier. But we have to appreciate everyone's right to their own freedom and respect that freedom. And also to know that we may not know what's best for someone, and to trust that Divine Mother is their mother just as much as ours, taking care of them. But sometimes then I liken it to people on the spiritual path. Well, first of all, we often used in America the image of the black sheep. If you know that in a herd of sheep, most of them will be born white, but every now and then there will be one that's born black. And so it becomes a phrase, the black sheep is sort of the family member that doesn't quite fit, but everybody kind of keeps around anyway. And then, but you feel out of place. And then at Ananda, all the black sheep from all the families, all the black sheep meet. And then we all match and we all have a good time together. But then, of course, in India, another image that could be very helpful for any devotee, anyone, but especially a devotee, is that of the quail. is that we all know that the quail lays it, like the cuckoo bird, lays its egg in someone else's nest, which is quite something. And you find human quails sometimes too, not with babies, but with other things, to drop their troubles at your door. But anyway, but what about the baby quail? You see, the quail is born and then looks around and kind of, you know what? Nobody looks like me. My brothers and sisters don't look like me. Amma does not look like me. I mean, it's so funny when they do it in the nest of this very small bird, and this little bird is frantically trying to like feed worms to this huge baby. And the mother could fit inside the mouth. It's quite something. Very nice to care for the baby quail, but we wake up just sort of, huh? And so it's important to find your spiritual home, your home in God, because then it's wonderful to help other people, because you have that peace, that satisfaction, that security now. Often we are uncomfortable because our heart is not satisfied. When our heart becomes satisfied, especially in meditation, especially through Hong Sau and Kriya, that's what would give you that experience. Because again, this is not just theory or an advertisement. When you have your own experience, you know. Then you can relate things to that. Okay. Now that I have that peace, now that desire is quenched, I'm not so needy. Why don't you be nicer to me? Why do you have to talk to me like that? Why can't you recognize me sometimes? Why is it always about you? That's coming from a needy place. You see? It's sort of like watching somebody enjoying their paranta, like I do very often, as I said, because I'm allergic to it. So I can... Is it nice? Yes. Are you enjoying? I see that's your third one. Get your own. Make Italy then, or something else you're not allergic to. We have to feed ourselves sometimes, which is to say all the time. And then we're not looking to other people for getting that basic need met. This is what put me on the spiritual path. Someone said to me, "What is the ultimate fulfillment you seek in life?" And I said, "I want love." And she said, "Good, that's very good. Because the love between two people is forever perfect." And she said, she was married, I wasn't. And then she said, "And it is a ceaseless celebration through meadows of happiness." She said, "Excuse me." She said, "That love you're talking about, you will never find on earth." She said, "That's divine love that you're talking about. Divine love. There is such a love." That's the thing to remember. When we find that we aren't getting what we want from this planet, it doesn't mean it's not there. And it doesn't mean it's not there for us. It may mean it's not here on earth. But it is there. You can find it in God. You can find it in yourself. It has to be there in a way because you can visualize it. You can imagine it. You can desire it. Meaning, sort of, you could say, it gets a little too philosophical, but the potential for it, the desire for it, implies the existence of it. Because everything is ultimately consciousness. But anyway, I'll leave that for later. Don't want to get too philosophical in the talk. Master said, if my talk is too philosophical, then I will be able to say with the doctors that the operation was a success and the patient died peacefully on the table. Meaning... And that happened another time. Someone said, "Can you just stop talking like this and give us real philosophy?" And so he did. "We want real philosophy from the Vedas." And so he did. He said, in 10 minutes, everyone was asleep. So, that we can get it. It does exist. Just maybe not here. But it doesn't mean it's out of reach. Okay, fine, then I die and then I have it. No, you find it in meditation. You connect to heaven inside. You connect to yourself. There's a part of you that may not only desire it, but may remember it. You see? Being in a deeply uplifted vibration. In the astral world, where the Master said one of the problems with Earth is that everybody of all different vibrations is mixed together. On the other hand, that allows you to make great spiritual progress. So it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing. If nothing else, you're motivated. Okay, I've got to get some peace somehow. And but in the astral world, there are different levels, and everybody of a particular vibration is on that level, and anybody above can go visit the levels below, but not vice versa. And so, anyway, I'm a harmonious person. I enjoy harmony in my relationships. I don't like harshness and all these things, and why am I surrounded by it? And it didn't used to be this way before birth. I used to talk about, I read this phrase from Master's autobiography to my mother that he mentioned man's prenatal tendencies. And she said, prenatal? Because she was a nurse. And so, postnatal. We all talk postnatal care after birth. Postnatal, there is no prenatal. And I didn't argue with her. But she read the book later, and she said she was pleased with the book well enough. So, we may have these memories of things should be easier than they are. Maybe we remember the past life too. But these tests make us strong. That was part of the theme of last week. These tests are here to make us strong, to help us to grow, to say my happiness doesn't depend on everything going well outside of me. We really have to dig deep on the one hand and be strong. On the other hand, we have to be open about how we feel with Master, maybe not with someone who can't listen. And because those feelings have to be heard, they have to be released to a certain extent. We don't want to go fully into them if it makes us less peaceful. But we can't also deny this is how I feel, and pray, ask for help. But then also meditate, chant, mix with others in satsang, because that positive vibration is also very healing. Without even addressing necessarily specifics, but just dunking ourselves in the vibration. We notice, for example, Swamiji said this of Master, that he went to see Master in like a satsang or something, or a meeting, determined to ask him some questions. And this other disciple said this too. And as soon as they sat with him, all the questions left their mind. Now, I don't think it was Master saying, I'm not in the mood to answer questions, so clearing their minds. It wasn't that. He said that in his presence, it just there was nothing really that had to be asked. Partly maybe they were so joyful that who cares about any of these things? Or there was such clarity in the air that the questioning tendency was just gone. I don't know, but we experienced the same thing with Swamiji. We would go, because often he would begin a satsang, are there any questions? And so I would sort of come up, I'm going to come there and I'm going to have a question, and in case I have an opportunity, I'm going to ask it. And then I would be there with Dharmini and others. He would say, are there any questions? And I would just, Just couldn't help it. Although once in a satsang, when we had a satsang and we had gone through as a team, he was meeting with a small group of us. We had gone through a very difficult thing. And we were getting to meet with him because of that difficult thing. He wanted to give us some energy. And he said, well, does anyone have any questions? And nobody said anything. And I didn't want to be the one to bring it up. And I was the newest and the youngest. But I also thought, look, we really need help with this. And so he said, well, maybe we could all meditate together. And I thought, no. I mean, of course I would want to meditate with Swamiji, but I need help. We all do. And someone said, that would be a lovely idea. So I was getting really worried. So I said, Swamiji, I have a question. He said, how could we expect anything else? And then I brought it up that we've gone through such a hard thing. And it has just, as a team, as the people we work with, how do we get back to how do we sort of get the whole thing going again? It's been so disrupted, the dynamics between the leaders and then the dynamics between the people they were working with and so on. He said, get back to your center. And I if I could have, I would have said, center, and the center. Center enge. I forgot I had a center. Oh, that's right. I remember having a center somewhere here. Yeah. Because we had been so derailed. he said, sure, we care about the group's center, but you get back to your center first. It always works that way. And it helped me because I had been too outwardly identified. This person is worried, and that person said that to that person, and we're trying to just keep the harmony here, and don't let anyone notice that we're all kind of weird because we didn't want to affect the people we were working with. And I just forget it. Divine Mother, I return the running of this universe back to you. I'm just going to be in my own center. I'm going to just do Kriya. I'm just going to separate and trust and so on. And anyway, that worked. So when it comes to that which is keeping us from God, we can say many things that we have learned on the spiritual path. We can call it karma. Karma is actually, how does karma stop you from finding God? Excuse me. Because our karma is actually stored in the spine, these vrittis. They're described as vritti, as whirlpool, a spinning thing into its center, into itself. And so these vrittis of karma are in the spine, the astral spine. Don't try to dig them out of the physical spine. They're in the astral spine, and they block the flow of energy up the spine to here to let us out, to let us into God. And so they block, which is to say they impede. They don't stop. I mean, don't feel, oh yeah, I must be really blocked and all this. Listen, if you're even wanting God, there's a good flow. Master said it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. And you all have committed to that in many different ways, meaning in your own way. But some of you after level 1, are here after level 1. Some of you are here after having the higher kriyas and so on. And so it reminds me, though, of Swamiji saying to an audience once in a public talk, and I wondered if he was testing their openness also. I wonder if he felt something. He said, it takes very, very, very good karma, Master said, even to want to know God. So I would say that all of you here, you came to this talk, you have very good karma. I won't say very, very, but very. Because, you come to a public talk sometimes, why? Well, there's AC, and it's free, and I can just kind of sleep here for a little bit and then go home and eat. And so, in other words, come to a class, put out some more energy, show that you really want this, and that then shows that you really want God. Just doing something passively is still very good karma, but let's do more. Because the more open we are, the more God can come. It's that simple. And so we can say that karma blocks it. These vrittis, though, are not just karma, they're also desires. At the heart of every karma really is a desire. That's a little harder to explain in a short amount of time, but it's true. If you do an action with desire, I really told that person off and I meant every word, that generates much more karma than if, what if we're reading a script, to someone, stand aside before I slash you. And then after it cut, oh, you okay? Yeah, how's it? Did you see, totally relax. You didn't mean it at the person. You're acting. And that doesn't generate karma in the same way, which should be a relief to the actors. But there's some actors here. And so, anyway, that you hit somebody with intent, which I hope is not a recent memory, that generates much more karma than if you turn accidentally in making a sweeping gesture philosophically and you bump into someone. Swamiji said that happened to him in Italy. He was with a friend and they were talking, a friend from Ananda, and they were sitting in an outdoor cafe. And this, a nun was approaching them in her full, outfit. And his friend she was carrying a coffee, and he went like this, not seeing her, and knocked the coffee and completely spilled all over her. And she just smiled. And they said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And he says, no, it's okay. Don't worry. No problem. I mean, she would have had to totally go and change her clothes or change her whole program. He said she had just such a smile. She was totally relaxed about it. And he said that, was a real proof of her spiritual growth and so on. And so the these desires. At the heart of every karma is a desire. And at the heart of every desire every desire is of the form, I want this, or I don't want that. That's desire. Very plain and simple. And that's important because sometimes we won't know. For example, I don't know if I have these desires and so on. And one easy way to find out if we have any desires is to notice if we are ever angry. And remember, it is not enough to say, I am a yogi, and yogis do not get angry, and therefore I do not get angry. First of all, that's not true. And second of all, it's not helpful. If we're angry, we can say, I'm angry. If we're upset, say I'm upset. Maybe don't say it to the person if they don't care, but at least say it to yourself. And more importantly, say it to Master, say it to God. Because, as Krishna tells us in the Gita, he talks about desire, when thwarted, when blocked, flames to anger. And so doing some reverse engineering on that, if we are angry, it means we had a desire that was blocked. And that is a very helpful way for finding all of our desires. I mean, there's the positive desires, but then there's the I don't want. And if I got upset, again, because the Swiggy was 4 minutes and it was not coming, because my desire was being blocked. And so to say, for example, I have a desire for basic decency when speaking to me. I don't think that's a desire, that's just the law. Well, people break the law all day long. Sometimes we break the law. So it's just, why do I need them to talk to me in a certain way? Because I want peace, I want love. Well, we do. But remember where that comes from. The hole in our hearts will only ever be filled by God. That's what my friend was telling me, by that divine love. And we can do it through meditation, through serving, through devotion, by mixing with other positive people. Very easy to do that way. That's why Master has given us all of this, to make it easy. He is both the doctor and the chemist. He's written the prescription and he's filling it for us, saying you're going to need satsang, so CIT Nagar is not too far away, Ilya, and you'll need techniques, and so here is Hong Sa and Om technique and Kriya. And more, much more. You'll need something to fill your days with, and Swamiji writes all this music, that song we just listened to. So, and these books, of course, you'll need something to study, to grow in wisdom. So he's given it to us all for our sake. Because he loves us. It's just that simple. And because we want it. As I said, that's important. We have to want it. Otherwise, it's not fair. God won't impose. And neither should we on someone, hitting them over the head with these books and so on. Better not to. Although a friend of mine said he was coming from another religion, and it's not that being a yogi changes your religion, but some religions think that way. And so he wanted to have a conversation with his mother about it, and so when she visited, he left Autobiography of a Yogi, he said, in a very conspicuous place. And sure enough, she came across this and then to his surprise she had heard of it and she was open to it, and so it had to happen. But I thought that was so clever of me. Mother, I'm going to sit down, I want to tell you something. Instead, just and sure enough, then they had their conversation. So every desire that's in the form of I want, I don't want, I like, I don't like, you know what those both have in common besides like? I is at the heart of it. And so it's the ego that really prevents us from finding God. And that does not mean that we ourselves prevent ourselves from finding God, because the ego is not us. Master said, defined ego as the soul identified with the body. You see, the soul identified with the Adar. That this is who I am. And you say, well, no, you're not. You're much more than that. We'll tell that to the bank, because that's what they want to know. What is your name and what is your Adar and so on. Maybe mobile number. I mean, that we are not those things. You know you lived before you had an Adar? Hard to believe? Not a pan. You always had a pan, but no, I'm joking. So these things, it's a joke about paying taxes anyway, never mind. So the thing is that that the soul identifies. We have a soul and we have a body. I mean, we accept, yes, there's a body. We have a soul, so the masters tell us, so we sometimes feel in meditation, so we sometimes know, I'm better than this. I can behave better than this. I want to be my true self, not my irritable self. As Master said, if you become a little irritable and that builds, each day's irritability grows until you become a full-fledged irritable person. I don't want to be irritable, because most of all, I irritate myself. You see? I mean, it disturbs my peace to be irritable, much regardless of whatever else. Even if it's that person's fault, I'm still the one suffering because of it. So let me not. And so let me be myself. That self is the soul. And so the ego is just this connection between the two. And if you say, gosh, well, yeah, but it is the body. It's only the only body I've ever known. Really? Is it really? Sometimes the more you meditate, you sort of feel, maybe I lived before. Sometimes you have a strange affinity, a positive connection with a place you've never been before. A friend of ours, Sairam, said when he went to Canada, he felt like he was home. And furthermore, all the people he met seemed to sort of greet him and welcome him, and he felt that he's been to many countries, but somehow that was special. And bear in mind, he's from Chennai, and Canada is cold. So there's nothing outwardly that would have made him feel like home. I mean, you go to Texas, sure, that's hot. You can be home. That's fine. If you go to Singapore, fine. It's even hotter than Chennai. So perfectly comfortable somehow. But it was very different from his outward associations. It wasn't that he had a masala dosa in Canada and felt like he was home. So you also might have an aversion for some place that you can't explain, or something. You may have likes and dislikes that you don't know why you have them. And it's partly because you've always had them from your first impression. Not because the first time you experienced this thing you got hurt. That's easy enough to explain. Nothing was happening, still I have a caution. That might be a hint about your past lives. Certain things you know are not helpful. Certain habits you know, ways of living, are destructive. Alcoholism, for example, is destructive. I don't mean it in a judgmental way. I mean it in a compassionate and sad way. People's lives are ruined by it. And then you may not have a desire to be an alcoholic. Master said the reason why you don't is because we already were. And we have taken that one as far as it could go. Someone's drunk, we were a bigger drunk. And then we realized, you know what? My life is, I don't want that anymore. It doesn't work. How do we know it doesn't work? We found out. So keep that in mind, especially if you see somebody suffering with something or doing something that you know that's just not going to work. How do you know? Because we did it in the past. So we should feel that compassion, that connectedness to everyone. Even somebody against you, screaming to get their point across, and you're not screaming. They're thinking that's the only way they can be heard. Or that's the element of their sort of lack of self-control or emotional maturity. Or they're just worried and afraid, whatever. We know that doesn't work. Why? Because we've tried it, probably even in this life. So again, just keep that in mind, that, okay, if I've learned something, I probably suffered to learn so in the past, and I'm grateful. So it is this I, but this small I. I spelled capital No, lowercase. Because the real I is the divine I, is the soul. That's who we really are. That's what continues life after life. The ego does too, until we overcome it. But when we overcome it, we don't just sort of dissolve into some cosmic goo. Then we're just not left anywhere. Master said you always retain the memory of those lives that you lived and so on, and God can come through you more. The less there is of ego, the more God can come through you to help you and to help others. So it's really as simple as that. The less identified we are, the more open we can feel God trying to help us every day, every minute. We can hear Master. We can feel Master. It's like unplugging our ears and being able to hear Him better. Opening our heart and being able to feel Him better. You can think of it this way too. The more we feel in that sense of the lowercase I, the more closed we are. And so all we have to do is open. And so that's why we meditate, to overcome the ego. That's why we chant, to overcome the ego. Which is to say, again, if you don't like that, because sometimes people say, yes, but then if I don't defend my ego, or if I go away, then I won't be anything. And people are stomping all over me all the time anyway. But that's not you. And it doesn't mean you can't be strong and even be... I saw once there was an actor at Ananda acting in one of Swamiji's plays. He was the principal of a school, but he was not acting as that. He was acting as a lord. And there were two other lords who were the evil lords. And they were in the scene kind of making noise, trying to pull attention away from what he was doing. That was in the play. But at one point, he just gave them a look, and then... And that was not in the script. He pulled out his principal gaze, his principal Medusa gaze, and they just turned to stone. It was fantastic to see, because I'd never seen that from him before, because we were just friendly. But, whoa, you did not want to cross him. And so he's a great yogi. And so doesn't mean you don't sometimes show a kind of strength that the other person will relate to. In other words, you may have to put on an act of being stern. You may have to put on an act of not accepting what someone is saying. Doesn't mean you have to put on an act of shouting out of control. That's not an act then, if it's out of control. So, but we have to sometimes do a different way than we feel for the sake of getting through to a person. So keep that in mind. But you're doing it by choice. You're free, and you're still free inside. Swamiji, a psychic friend of mine told me she was with Swamiji, she was a friend of his, and he said to someone, I'm very disappointed to hear that about what you did. Not what you did wrong, but that something. And the person was like, well, I'm going to try harder. And my friend said, I could feel that Swamiji wasn't disappointed at all. She said he was perfectly happy and accepting of the person, but he was trying to get through to her. And she said, I have to learn how to do that. So we just think of letting go of the ego as becoming more of yourself, more of who you really are, more of who you want to be. And letting go of the ego is getting closer to God, because that's really those two, that's one and the same. Which means closer to that joy, closer to that wisdom, closer to that love, closer to that peace. All of that means in letting go and stop resisting and moving, taking God's hand as He's reaching it out to you. Okay? God bless you.